So change is indeed possible. The question is how? Change is possible, but long-term change is hard. And in order to set the stage, I want to share this quote with you. It's a quote by Martin Seligman, who is the founder of the positive psychology movement and one of the most eminent psychologists at this time. And he says that the belief that we can rely on shortcuts to gratification and bypass the exercise of personal strengths and virtues is folly. It leads to legions of humanity who are depressed in the middle of great wealth and are starving to death spiritually. I shared this quote with you to once again emphasize how important it is to not only watch the video lectures, but also engage in the additional materials, because change is hard. The theme of this lecture is how to change, and this is what we are going to turn to now. One way to change is to rely on our willpower. But let me tell you a short story about willpower. A famous study done by Roy Baumeister instructed college students not to eat anything for a few hours and then come into an experiment. When the students arrived, they were given 2 plates, one full of cookies and another one with radishes. But then the researchers divided the students into 2 groups. One of the groups were told they could eat of whatever plate they wanted. The other group, however, was only allowed to eat from the radishes and not from the delicious cookies. After a certain amount of time, like 20 minutes or so, all of the participants were given some allegedly easy puzzles to solve. In truth, those puzzles are of the unsolvable kind. These get used in psychological research relatively often because you can see how long people persist in any specific task. The students in the first group, who were allowed to eat from whatever plate they wanted, persisted significantly longer than the group who had to repress their urge to eat from the delicious cookies. Those students had already used all their willpower to resist eating the cookies. They had less left to persist at the given task. Even though those 2 tasks, resisting cookies and solving puzzles, may seem unrelated, they both draw from the same easily depletable reservoir of energy. Because this reservoir of energy is what our willpower is all about. Luhr and Schwartz say that the limitation of conscious will and discipline are rooted in the fact that every demand on our self-control all draw on the same small, easily depleted reservoir of energy. What we learn from this is that relying on our willpower alone to make changes is not ideal. We need something else. Habits. In fact, we need lasting habits. The good news is that those people who really manage to make long-lasting change do not simply have higher willpower. In contrast, the people who really make it might not have strong willpower at all, but they understand that the key to implementing change is building lasting habits. A growing body of research suggests that as little as 5% of our behavior is consciously regulated. That means that we are creatures of habit. As much as 95% of what we do occurs automatically, without us even thinking about it. Most of us already have many habits in place, often outside our conscious awareness. These may range from brushing our teeth every morning and evening to planning for our day, or routines with the family and friends like eating together. We all also have some habits that are good and others that are bad for us. So what we want to build is some new good habits, and we might even get rid of some of the old habits that haven't served us well. So how then do we build new habits? Keep in mind these 4 key elements. We need specific behavior and time. We need one change at a time. We want to lower our activation energy. We want to keep the why, our reasons in mind. We'll look at them in more detail now. In the resources, you can find a worksheet, a template for an action plan to create effective change. It's a tool to put into action those 4 elements in a systematic manner. The first of those points were specific timing and precise behavior. That means if we want to build a new habit, we have to say very precisely when and what we want to do. To illustrate the importance of specifying what, when, and where we want to implement a new behavior, we'll take another look at research. In a study to increase compliance in a fitness program for non-exercising college students, researchers went and wanted college students who did not do any sports to participate in the fitness program. Their first attempt was to give them data about how exercise would significantly reduce their risk to all kinds of diseases. The participation in the program increased from 29 to 39%. But when this information was followed by a request that the students write down specifically when and where they intend to exercise, compliance went up to 91%. Similar results have been found for eating habit, instituting meditation practice, or other healthy behaviors. Change requires us to move beyond our comfort zone, and that's why it's best initiated in small, manageable doses, one change at a time. Why? Because it takes a lot of self-discipline, willpower, to start a new habit, and we don't have much of that, as we just discussed. The problem is that we often take on too much too quickly. So that's why I ask you to focus on one significant change at a time, 2 at maximum. But more than that is too much. And how long does it take to change a habit? We usually hear numbers like 3 weeks or 30 days. But it's not as clear, and research claims that habits need up to 200 days to form. Also, it depends on what habit you want to change. But what is important is that it takes a considerable amount of time and commitment, but it can have a life-changing effect in the long term. Remember neuroplasticity? Habits are those pathways. They are like a stream, growing into a river, but it takes time. Just as water takes time to broaden and widen its pathways, our brain needs time to broaden its own connections. So give yourself at least 30 days to build a new habit before taking on a new project. It takes this much time for the neural pathways to form in your brain. And again, focus on 1 or max 2 habits at a time. If you try to tackle all the changes that are proposed to you throughout this course at once, you will end up doing none of them. As sure as night follows day, you're going to end up without any positive change, and probably also frustrated. That's why incremental change is better than ambitious failure. Success feeds on itself. The third trick to build habits effectively is to lower the activation energy needed. Let's take a closer look at that. Have you ever thought about why we so often avoid doing things that we know are good for us? Like eating more vegetables, doing more sports, something of this kind. Just like water takes the path of least resistance, also the neurons in our brain take the path of least resistance. We take the path of least resistance. And in order to overcome this resistance, we need what is called activation energy. In physics, activation energy is the initial energy that's needed to start a reaction. Similarly, activation energy is needed for us to resist succumbing to our old habits and start new, more positive and productive ones. So if we want to create new habits, let's lower the activation energy for habits that we want to adopt and raise it for those habits that we don't want to or that we want to avoid. Let me give you an example. Let's say you want to start writing a journal every night. Put a journal or a piece of paper and a pen right on your bedside table. If you want to eat more healthily, prepare healthy snacks in advance, so you just have to take them out, just like you have to take out a Snickers out of the cupboard if you want to. If eating healthily is as easy and effortless as eating a chocolate bar, you are much more likely to change your eating habits. And these are just a few simple ideas, but be creative about whatever change you want to make. How can you make it easier for us to stick to new good habits? That's the question. The fourth way to ensure that your habits are effective and that they work is to keep your why in mind. This why refers to the purpose, the reasons why you're doing something. Having a purpose and understanding why you're doing something is a powerful source to drive you. And the most powerful sources of purpose are positive rather than negative. A negative source of purpose is defensive and deficit-based. This means it's based on a threat, on a physical or psychological threat. When we feel our security or our survival at stake, emotions such as fear, anger, and even hatred can be a powerful source of energy. The problem is the cost. Negative emotions drain our energy and prompt the release of hormones that are toxic to our systems if they remain for a longer time. Purpose, fueled by the feeling of deficit, also narrows our attention and limits our possibilities. By contrast, when we are able to move from the inner experience of threat to one of a challenge, we introduce a whole new range of possibilities in our lives. Rather than reacting to fear, we can focus on what is really meaningful and precious to us. I want to refer you again to the broaden and build theory, where we talked about how positive emotions broaden our mind and build our resources. Very often, having a positive or a negative purpose is simply about how we frame our goals. For example, are we working out to avoid becoming unattractive and overweight? Or do we do it because we strive to be fit and healthy? To be more able to do other tasks or to work towards a sports competition? The difference in our attitudes can be huge simply by having a positive purpose. In addition to a positive purpose, we also want to have an intrinsic purpose. The difference between intrinsic and extrinsic purpose is just as huge as the difference between positive and negative purpose. Are we doing what we do in order to please others, or in order to get something that we feel we don't have enough of, like money or power or social status, or maybe even love? Or do we do these things because we ourselves feel that they are valuable? Clarifying purpose takes time, quiet, uninterrupted time, which is something that many of us feel we simply don't have anymore. But if we want to live a fulfilled life that's devoted to things that really matter to us deep down, we have to realize that the only way is to spend time now on questions of meaning and purpose. And for this, I want to present you a wonderful way to connect to our deepest values and our life goals. It's about finding your legacy. You have more detailed instructions in your additional materials, but I will still go over them now because it's so important. Unfortunately, it is easy to lose sight of the things that are most important to us. It seems crazy, but it's true. How often do we overreact to a family member, get angry at someone we love, or lie to somebody we really care about? There are numerous other examples, and the answers are different for every one of us. But what is true for everybody is that we tend to forget about the things that we value most. That's why the following exercise is so powerful. This is an exercise to get you in touch with the things that really matter to us, to get in touch with our true self, our values, beliefs, and aspirations. For this exercise, I recommend you take at least an hour without interruptions and any distractions. Find it in the resources. One last thought. I encourage you to try journaling on a regular basis, even outside of this course. Journaling has been found to be really beneficial for many people. On the other hand, it is a great tool to document our change efforts and help us keep track of them. And it has even more benefits. For example, it helps us deal with negative emotions or traumatic experiences. Having said this, of course it's not for everybody. Some people simply do not like to write, and that's okay too. If so, you might want to try speaking into a voice recorder, or even better, to a friend.